news. Tickets for the Conference on Religious Trauma, Court 2023, are now available. Also, if you're interested in an ad-free version of the Divorcing Religion podcast, come join me over on Patreon. Links for both are in the show notes. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious recovery consultant. My guest today is New York-based photographer and filmmaker, Chris Johnson. I first heard of Chris through my friend and mentor, Dr. Marlene Winell. During a visit with Marlene, I noticed a beautiful coffee table book called A Better Life, 100 Atheists Speak Out on Joy and Meaning in a World Without God. To my delight, Marlene was featured in the book alongside James Randi, Julia Sweeney, Penn Teller, Steven Pinker, and many other atheists from around the world. His book is fantastic, but Chris didn't stop there. He also created a documentary film version called A Better Life, an exploration of joy and meaning in a world without God. Check our show notes for today's episode to learn more about these projects and how you can get a hold of them. Chris has traveled the world on a screening and lecture tour about a better life, speaking and screening the film in over 60 cities on 4 continents. Thanks for slowing down long enough for me to interview you today. It's really nice to have you here, Chris.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And we were just mentioning that you're often in New York. Right now, you're actually in Washington State, not too far from me here in British Columbia. And I'm really curious. I got to watch the documentary and I just was so appreciative. It's very, very thoughtful. And you could tell the people were speaking from the heart. They were being really earnest in their responses. I'm wondering what got you started on this whole journey. You must be an atheist yourself. Were you raised by atheists? What happened? What was your life like?
Well, thank you for that. So I was raised in a primarily non-religious household. My father is a very liberal Christian, but he actually didn't even start going to church until after my brother and I went off to college. And he goes to a very progressive, lesbian pastor kind of church, right? So very progressive. My mother is an atheist. My parents divorced when I was about 10 or 11. But we were raised, with kind of secularized Christian holidays like Easter and Christmas and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But, and we kind of knew a little bit about kind of the religious origins of some of those, but never raised in any kind of religious atmosphere at all, really.
That sounds so refreshing.
It's funny, I thanked my father the other day for raising us without religion because I've met so many people, obviously, through doing the book and the film and just meeting people in general in life, people who have been raised with kind of traumatic religious experiences, oppressive religious upbringings, religion getting in the way of people living their best life and kind of clouding their judgment and making them worry about things that they don't need to worry about. So I was very lucky in that sense, and I consider myself very lucky.
And did your brother, do you think is he more in the camp where you are, or has he tended more towards religious belief?
No, my brother is an atheist as well, as far as I know. It's funny. I'm sure he's an atheist, but I don't think I've ever outright asked him. But yes, I'm pretty sure he's an atheist. Right. He helped me on the book. Actually, he did the design and layout of the book as well. Graphic designer. And,
it's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that is so neat. So you both grew up in the same household, had the same parents, not in any way overly religious or overtly religious. And then he was able to help you on this incredible project. It really took my breath away when I saw the book. I felt this sense of relief wash over me that somebody had taken it upon themselves to do such an important project, because people just don't usually go around announcing that they are atheists. So we can sometimes feel like we're on an island all by ourselves. We don't know if people don't feel safe to divulge the fact that they don't subscribe to magical thinking when so many people around us, very religious people, it's kind of expected, it seems, in North America that people will be religious of some flavor or another. So I'm really grateful that you have done these projects. And I wonder what got you started on it. You mentioned that you'd gone to Concordia. What were you interested in doing?
Well, interestingly, at Concordia, I studied film production, which, as you probably know, Concordia has an amazing film program. Mm-hmm. And I minored actually in religious studies. Not because I was religious, as you know, but because I actually found it really interesting, getting out into the world and realizing that there are all these other beliefs out there. People believe all kinds of things, and I found that really interesting. So I took some fascinating courses, religion and sexuality, death and dying, like really, different world religion courses. So, because I found it interesting what other people believed. And I was kind of amazed that there were all these beliefs out there, new religious movements and cults, that kind of thing as well. Really fascinating stuff. And so it was actually nice to finally bridge my major and minor together in one project, finally. So,
right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that the religious studies, that does just sound fascinating because there are so many diverse religious groups all around the world. I mean, even in just North America, because we not only have Christianity, but hundreds of different branches of Christianity, maybe even more than hundreds. And the interesting thing to me is that most people who are, especially if they're indoctrinated in childhood, they believe 100%. A lot of people don't even ever stop to question it. But we know that what religion you are has an awful lot to do with where you were raised, like just plain geography. And people will defend their beliefs wholeheartedly. People in Christian groups can often feel like they have this mission to go out and proselytize, even aggressively trying to proselytize other people. And so all the people in the different groups, they really believe that theirs is the one. They have the secret sauce. Theirs is the only way. And it can make talking with each other and hearing each other quite difficult when people are holding on so tightly, when their ideology absolutely informs their identity.
Right.
It can be tricky.
Right. Absolutely. What was interesting too about this particular time, I should mention, is this is around 2005, 2006. This is right around the kind of genesis of the new atheist kind of movement. So God Delusion came out around this time, End of Faith came out around this time. So you really had that strong push as well. So my response to all that at the time, studying religion and the rise of the new atheism movement, was kind of thinking about myself as an atheist for the first time in a concrete sense. I wasn't religious up to that point, but I also never really thought about it that much until, one, I started studying religion, and two, the new atheism movement really kind of was born. And so that really kind of got me on the bandwagon of like, where do I fit into all this? And, thinking about my own religiosity and, or lack thereof, I should say. And kind of really at that point identifying as like, yeah, I'm an atheist, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, what, because for so long that was just kind of normal for me, coming up against religious ideologies and people thinking differently, it really made me kind of then identify more as an atheist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I hear from a lot of people who use the term angry atheists, and you seem the opposite of an angry atheist. You just seem like a fairly gentle person who's living your life and who doesn't feel the need to conform to other people's beliefs and ideas. And that also was interesting to me, watching your documentary. The people who were being interviewed just were very thoughtful in their responses, and it was much appreciated. That's for sure.
Thank you. I try. I mean, obviously, I do get angry, but I also do think of myself as someone who likes to think things through and be thoughtful and considerate and compassionate and have empathy for other people. And that extends to people who are religious. And I think there's, we as atheists need to often walk a fine line between condemning the religious ideology, which is so harmful, and people who also cause great amount of harm, but also that there are so many people who are struggling out there and in pain and traumatized by these religious ideologies, and walking that fine line between criticizing the religious ideology and acknowledging that these people have a place where they can feel comfortable and safe and express what they're going through. And that's why, what you're doing, what Marlene is doing, all these things are so important, because that part of it, that kind of healing process is so important, and showing empathy and compassion for what these people are going through is incredibly important.
Wow, that's true, and it can feel like such a tall order, particularly when people are coming to terms with their own religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome, when they're recognizing that essentially their rights were violated if they were indoctrinated in childhood, or, pressured to get baptized or sign purity pledges, these sorts of things. And those of us indoctrinated in very religious homes from birth, it's almost like our personalities don't have a chance to really develop apart from all the do's and don'ts and thous and thou shalt nots of our parents' religion. So we can come out of that, and really there is some anger that we have to grapple with, and anger is a legitimate part of the grieving process. Mm-hmm. But there is a point where we need to also recognize, yes, people crave certainty, security, order, and acceptance. And for many people, those items are found in the church. They're tied up in a bow. They can attend a religious service every week. It's often, a positive kind of uplifting message, not always, but there are people who will greet them. You're welcome. You can come in and sit, in any row, in any pew. Singing together, and singing feels so good. Music is so powerful. And when we're singing together with other people, it can be very moving. I'm thinking of the Canadian national anthem. But so kind of holding that tension, recognizing that, yes, I am allowed to feel anger about what happened to me. And also I recognize that religion seems to fill a need for many people. So I'm not running around yanking people out of the pews. I feel more like my place. If you picture an old time, wooden church building with stairs, I see myself at the bottom of the stairs catching people who stumble out or are thrown out of the church, people who stagger out. They're not sure what has just happened to me. Why I used to believe this, I don't believe it anymore. What's happening? And so I see my place as providing a safe place for them and telling them you're not alone, and you're going to be okay. There is community outside the religious community, but religion has been around for so long that it's been perfected in that way of making everyone feel that it's a community for them. The only other similar place really is the military, where they've been as successful in kind of building that brotherhood dynamic. Otherwise, it's pretty much reserved for cults and religions. So it can feel hard for us to hold that space for people who are on a different journey or a different time in their journey. What made you realize that a book was something that was needed or something that you wanted to do? Had you always wanted to do a book?
No, I mentioned my brother earlier. My brother was the one who said, you should do a photography book. I was taking lots of photos. We were on a trip together, and I was taking tons of photos, and we were listening to a lot of podcasts about religion and atheism on this trip. And he said, you should do a photography book. And I, kind of said, well, there's so many photography books out there. There's so many photographers. Nobody's interested in what I'm doing. And kind of this idea just came up of atheism and showing people in a way that we haven't seen before in the atheist world. So, like we just talked about, there is so much legitimate hostility against religious ideologies. But kind of what you were talking about, catching the people at the bottom of the church staircase, there wasn't a whole lot of, well, there's no God. Well, what do we do now? How do we live our lives? How do we see the world? What do I do now? Now that I've lost all that, are there examples of how I can live my life? And, there is humanism and these ideas, but they're very intellectual. They're very academic in many respects. And so having something that's, a big book of smiling people and talking about the big questions in life and talking about how we deal with the difficulties of life, because things are difficult. You mentioned how comforting religion can be to so many people. And I fully admit that many religious people might be happier than me in many respects, because I believe that this life is finite. I believe that I'm going to die and I'm not going to go off to some magical, wonderful place to be around all my friends and family again. And if we're being honest about it, that kind of sucks in many ways, right? Like it makes what we do here much more important. But if that's the reality of the situation, which I do believe that is, that changes how we should kind of go about our lives and live our lives. Mm-hmm. And so it was important to kind of show these people and have these conversations and talk about these things in a way that was in a sense different from a lot of the new atheist stuff, which is just kind of legitimately attacking the religious ideology. But for me, so many other people do that much better than I can. And so that's why I'm kind of doing this other side of the conversation.
Wow. Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. Atheism, it's like a bitter pill compared to the comforting, warm, fuzzy fantasy of religious afterlife, as long as you're expecting heaven rather than hell.
Right.
But that can be really a part of the equation that sets people off into existential angst I was very delighted when I came to the conclusion that actually, I don't think there is a hell. And then I was, but that means then there might not actually be a heaven. And that was really hard for me to consider. And we recently lost someone dear to us, and that person was religious. And so the funeral was quite religious, and there was a lot of support. All the religious people were supporting each other. And then here sit the atheists on the sidelines. And the best that we can do really is treasure the memories that we had with our loved one. And that's how we keep people alive, by keeping their memory alive and, honoring the good works that they did and what kind people they were. So yeah, it can feel like a hard shift going from religion to atheism. But I also felt in some ways it was like stepping into reality. It was like stepping out of black and white, which my fundamentalism really was, rigidity, black and white thinking, and stepping into technicolor. And sometimes when we are forced to accept the brevity of human life because we are no longer believing in an afterlife, boy, that brings things into sharp relief and clear focus. And it means we really do want to focus on living the best life we can, squeezing the most out of every day, loving people the most we can, helping people the most we can, not because we're expecting to get anything from it or get to heaven because of it, but just because we're human and we all need help sometimes and we all benefit from encouragement. So I'm glad that that moved you to write this book. I don't know of any other books that had been done before that were presenting atheists in such a happy, meaningful way. I tell people that when we leave religion, we must mature from meaning seekers into meaning makers. It's time for us to decide what feels meaningful to us, and it's going to be different from person to person.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned this moment of stepping from the black and white into the Technicolor, this Wizard of Oz moment of kind of opening your eyes to the reality of the world. And it can be difficult for people who are trying to help others out of that situation. I'm sure you experience this as well, where once you're in the Technicolor, friends, family, loved ones, people who are kind of still constrained by the religious ideologies, it can be very difficult to kind of see them going through the process and worrying about the things they're worrying about. And, one example in my own life for me, again, never having been religious, it was never an issue, was, the fact that I'm gay, right? Was never something that was an issue for me. I never had any angst about it, any difficulties of, oh, I'm gay, this is difficult, what am I going to do? And I met so many people who struggled so much and continue to struggle with their sexuality because of their religion. And, people who worry about going to hell, people who are in the closet, people who are, very unhappy with themselves, don't accept themselves for who they are. And it's so incredibly painful for me to see that and to see people going through those difficulties and trying to help and trying to, show that their worry about hell is unfounded, but it's so ingrained in people. I've met people who have not been religious for years and years and years and still have nightmares about going to hell. Mm-hmm. I think I spoke about that with Marlene. We talked about people who, this religious trauma syndrome, which I believe she coined that term. She did. Mm-hmm. Which is really an incredible thing, not in a good way, but just in a profound way, that these people struggle through these experiences. And like we talked about, even 40 years later, people still struggle with thoughts of going to hell and whether hell's a real place and the difficulty with that.
Oh, yeah. And if we're indoctrinated in childhood, we have no psychological defenses against the indoctrination, particularly if it's a parent or authority figure that's telling us this is the way it is and this is the most important truth, and you must never let anyone dissuade you from it. And then we're taught that there's eternal torment if we don't do it just right, if we don't keep our lives, exactly a certain way. And so we take that in and kind of put all sorts of psychological booby traps around that. So we're not going to start pulling on that one loose thread and have everything unravel, because it's our very identity by that point. So yes, I definitely hear from clients in my counseling practice who are coming to terms with their own religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome. And they just have still such tremendous fear and anxiety about hell. And they even say, I know logically, I know that there's no hell. My brain knows it, but my heart hasn't got there. My emotions don't quite get it yet. And so then, of course, I recommend that people do some research around hell, the origins of hell. When did it start coming into, people talking about it? And also to research, how did other people cope with this? How do people shrink this fear? And it takes work to do, and it takes time, but it is definitely very possible. So if anyone's watching or listening to this today, I invite them to reach out to me, and we can talk about it. There is help available, because that's such a big deal. How did you find Marlene, or how did you determine who would go in your book and in your documentary?
Well, I mean, that was a huge process. I did a crowdfunding campaign to raise the money to do the project, which was probably the most stressful 2 months of my life doing that. But it ended up being successful, and it was incredibly joyous for me to be able to have support and to be able to make that project. People thought this project was really important. And yeah, so some of them were people that I had read their works or knew of them beforehand because of my interest in atheism, people like Steven Pinker, Penn Teller, Richard Dawkins, Dan Dennett, people like that. Other people, I wanted it to be a variety of different people. So, someone like Alex Honnold, I just saw on TV one day on 60 Minutes, the rock climber. And I just saw him on TV and I thought, this is amazing. This guy doing these incredible athletic feats, free soloing. And I wonder if he's an atheist. And I looked it up online, and turns out he was an atheist. So I reached out to him, and he was super excited. And just interesting ways like that. Or, once I found people, I would ask others, do you have recommendations of people you think would be a good fit for this kind of thing? So it was kind of a variety of different methods for finding a lot of people. But, it'd be nice to have even more people. But it's a lot of work. So stick with 100 for now.
Yeah. So how long did it take once you actually had the idea for the book, you'd done the crowdfunding, then how long did it take to get the whole thing done? Like all the interviews, all the photographs, printing the book. How long was that process?
I think it was about 9 months or a year, somewhere in between 9 months and a year. Yeah.
That seems fast for such a big project. I'm amazed.
Yeah, I was running around quite a lot during that time. It was an ordeal, just kind of, trying to group people geographically and kind of go to one place and do, a bunch of people in the same spot. And so it was a logistical endeavor for sure as well, a challenge. But I kind of like that stuff, right? I like a good challenge. So it was okay. But yeah, it was about 9 months to a year of that. And then I worked on the film after that for another about a year at that point. And then did traveling even more, speaking and showing the film. I initially was only going to do just a handful of like little screenings and lectures about the film, maybe 6 or 7 of them around. And I just kept doing more and more and more of them. And the numbers I sent you actually aren't updated. I said 60, but it's actually 125 cities now.
Wow.
So even more places I've shown the film and done lectures, and it's really been an incredible experience to be in the same room as people and get their reactions in real time, and get their reactions from religious people who wander in and show up and see the film and want to hear about atheism and stuff like that too. So it's been quite a journey for sure.
Were you in any dangerous countries, or so I'm thinking particularly of like Saudi Arabia or anything like that? Were you able to conduct any secret interviews with people, or is that something that you've ever done? Like talking with people who, I mean, their life is on the line if they're in a devoutly Muslim country and they reject that belief system.
I have done interviews with people who have fled or fleeing situations like that. People like Miriam Namazi, Nala Mahmood, people who who are not in those countries at the moment, but are connected to them. But yeah, I didn't travel to dangerous places to do it. That could be tricky.
That's for sure. What was, can you think of something that was surprising for you? Either something surprising that happened in an interview or just something that surprised you about the whole process?
Well, one thing that always has stuck with me, and this is a bit that's featured in the film, speaking with, well, I'll mention two things. The first one is A.C. Grayling, the wonderful British philosopher. He talks about in the film that you have less than 1,000 months in your life.
Oh,
You live until you're 80. What's 12 times 80 is less than 1,000 months. And, 300 of them you're asleep. And then another 300 of them you're waiting in line somewhere. And so basically you've got about 300 months to do whatever it is you want to do in your life. And that really stuck with me. That, I've only got 300 months to do whatever I want to do. And it doesn't seem like a lot. And, I'm 41 now. So I've already gone through a lot of those months, in childhood and teenage years and all that. And, so it makes you think about what things are important to you, right? Like, as a struggling independent artist, my finances are not as great as they would be if I had like a regular 9-to-5 kind of job, right? Mm-hmm. But would I be happy doing like a 9-to-5 job? Not really. So it's looking at trade-offs, looking at what things are important. So the freedom that I get from the work I do is better for me than kind of the more financial secure route of, having a regular kind of 9-to-5 job. The other thing I'll mention is what Julia Sweeney talked about, where she mentions reflecting on the happy moments in your life. And I found that so useful because it really puts into perspective what things matter to you, right? Where do you get the most happiness from? And so taking some time meditating on those happy moments, like, that night when I met that person, or, my group of friends and I did this one thing that one time, and really kind of thinking about those things. And that really stuck with me too, because it can lead to identifying the things that really will make you happy in the future and creating more of those. So those are the two moments for me that really kind of stayed with me.
That's wonderful. One thing that I recommend for people, particularly who have left religion and now they're trying to build a secular life for themselves, is to do values clarification work. And that makes me think of Julia talking about, what made her happy, and thinking about that. Because our values do tend to shift. When I was deeply religious, obedience was very important to me. Now autonomy is very important to me. So kind of a real shift there. And once we can figure out what our values are right now, then we can look at our life and see where are areas that I'm out of alignment. Is my career, is my job in alignment with my top few values there? If not, maybe I need to reconsider. You've chosen a more risky path than a 9-to-5, but you get so much more out of it than you would. And I can totally relate to that. I feel sometimes my work as a counselor is feast or famine. Sometimes I only have 1 or 2 clients in a day, and then other times I have so many that it feels like almost too many. So the work that I do feels so good to me, to be helping other people. It makes it worth it. So I'm not going to get rich off it, but gosh, it feels good to be helping people. So I imagine that's similar for you in that there's satisfaction. That's another thing I was thinking of. Do you take pride in what you've done? Like, can you sit and soak that in and go, wow, I did this. You look at that book, you made it. That book wouldn't be there without you. What does that feel like?
Yeah, I'm very proud of it, but also it's something that, we don't do anything really by ourselves in life, I think. I mean, I did put in a lot of work into this, and it was a huge part of me. But also, like I mentioned before, my brother who did so much work on it too. But also all the people who supported it, financially, but also just emotionally, sending letters, sending emails, things like that. So it's something I do take a lot of pride in, but it's also something where it wasn't just me. It was like so many other people involved in it and were a part of it for sure.
Yeah. That group effort. I mean, every person that you interviewed had a part in it as well. That's just so cool. And then you did the book first and then the documentary after.
Right.
And so did you have to do more traveling for the documentary or less than for the book?
I did some. I didn't do as much because when I interviewed people for the book, I filmed the interviews. So I already had most of that interview footage already. Mm-hmm. Way too much, actually. I mean, 100 people and you do interviews with everybody and you can't fit them all into the film. So there's a lot of extra stuff also that I need to go through. But, yeah, it's there was a bit of travel for that, shooting B-roll and shooting additional interviews and stuff like that. But a lot of the core stuff was actually already there. So that's why it wasn't as extensive in terms of travel doing that. But one thing that's funny about shooting documentary films, if you've ever seen films and where you have TV presenters or documentary people on camera, walking around a particular place, a historic place, looking at things, it's really weird to shoot that kind of stuff because you feel silly because it looks great in the final product. With voiceover and music and all that stuff. But when you're actually in the location, you say, okay, we're going to get a shot of me walking from here to here looking at stuff. You just feel silly, doing this performative thing where you're just, I'm going to walk and I'm going to look and what am I doing? But that's kind of the magic of filmmaking, right? You kind of put it all together in the end and it works. But in the moment, it's a bit silly.
That's so funny. I can just imagine. Yeah, that would feel pretty weird. Now I'm walking over here.
Walking and looking. Yeah.
That's right. I wonder, was there anyone that you interviewed that you were either like super excited to be interviewing them or they were kind of a hero to you or someone that you had so much admiration for that you had to just keep checking in with yourself to stay calm while you were doing it? Or was it all just like, wow, these are cool people and they're all the same to me? Was there anyone extra special for you in there?
Everybody was, gracious and nice and I was at ease. But one funny story was, I was a bit nervous going to meet Steven Pinker and Rebecca Goldstein, because it's like this intellectual power couple of minds, and I remember as I was going over there, I was taking the ferry actually from Boston, and on the way over, I was nervous, and I remember thinking, well, okay, at least with the photography stuff. I've got that down. Like I know what I'm doing, and even if I mess something up, they're not going to know. Like they don't know anything about that. And when I get to the door, Steven Pinker answers and opens the door, and we're chatting and stuff. And he says, "Oh, and I have to tell you, I love photography too. Let me show you all the photography stuff." And I was like, "Oh no!" Like he knows all. Oh, this is awkward. But no, so that was one funny moment. But no, but there was definitely for me a sense of gratitude and imposter syndrome for sure for me, being around people who were, intellectually incredibly, high achieving in that sense. People who, I can, AC Grayling, people I can just have these incredible conversations with who are so brilliant. And here I am, this little there's a lot of imposter syndrome for me, kind of going through this process for sure. Yeah,
I can totally relate. When I do my conference on religious trauma, when I'm writing to people to see if they might like to speak, and I'm thinking, they won't even know who I am. They probably won't even answer the letter, probably won't even get to them. And then they're very excited. And next thing I know, they're actually speaking at my event. And I do have that imposter syndrome where I'm like, who am I? I haven't even finished the book I'm writing, and this person's done 5 books or whatever it is that they've done. So I think that's very human. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What was it like meeting James Randi? And also, what was it like with Penn and Teller?
Well, James Randi was a really incredible hero of mine. I mean, I remember really kind of getting into the skeptic movement, and feeling that that's such a valuable space. And he was incredible, an incredible person. I met him in Florida at his home, and he was just a delight. We sat down and just chatted, and I always remember we were sitting there, and I was waiting for my ride back to the hotel, and it was going to be like 45 minutes for the car, and I felt kind of bad because I was like, oh, it's 45 minutes. We have to wait 45 minutes for the car. But he didn't bat an eye, and he pulled out this big book, this big kind of scrapbook thing. And we spent the next 45 minutes of him just going through this scrapbook, and it was photos and articles and things from his life.
Wow.
And what an incredible experience to sit there and just talk with him and flip through this scrapbook of his life. And he really was an incredible person, and someone I think we all miss in the atheist skeptic community.
Wow, what a treasure, and what a treasure for you to have had that intimate time with him, where he was just going through his scrapbook. Just such a gem. And the things I've seen of him, he just seemed thoughtful, in some ways unassuming. I mean, he was a fairly small stature. He wasn't yelling and, commanding in that way, but wow, he had a way of making things so simple, like making it understandable. That whole skeptic movement there, we owe him such a tremendous debt. He was a wonderful person. Yeah. And then what about Penn and Teller? What were they like to interview?
Penn and Teller were great too. I met them in Las Vegas, where they have their show. Mm-hmm. And I was just there briefly. We had a very kind of small window to kind of, showbiz people are very busy, right? So it's, you kind of squeeze everything into a very short amount of time. So it was very quick in and out. But really nice. I had a lovely conversation. I didn't do their interviews in person. I did their interviews over the phone after I'd met them to do the photographs. And I remember just having a wonderful conversation with both of them. Separately, I had conversations, which I know will surprise some people that I had a conversation with Teller, but he does talk. Oh, my book just fell down.
It's a sign.
Oh no, it's God. But Yeah, Teller, we had a wonderful conversation. He's so brilliant and really fascinating to speak to. And, yeah, it was great. It was great.
Wow. It must have just been an incredible experience to talk with all these people from different that's the book from different walks of life and even different cultures, and every family is its own unique culture, like microcosm there. How did your dad respond to this project?
My dad loves it. My dad is a huge fan of this. He all the books actually sit in his basement. My childhood home there. That's where they live. And he's wonderful. He's again, he's a very liberal Christian. Again, I mean, I think a lot of his religiosity, I can't speak for him, but I surmise that a lot of his religiosity is community based.
Mm-hmm.
He found a community of liberal people, and so that is much more about community and singing and choral music and that kind of thing for him. Mm-hmm. And it's very open and accepting and inclusive, and it's basically Unitarian Universalist, similar religious ideology, but I don't remember the exact specifics, but it's very close to that. So
nice. Yeah. So he doesn't have a conflict there. He just really supports you in what you've done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice.
So really good. Again, I'm very lucky. I feel, some people would say blessed. I would not, but I feel very lucky. Lucky is the good word to use. Mm-hmm. That I have that kind of experience and support. And again, that's one of the reasons why it pains me that there are so many people who struggle, and there are so many people who worry about hell, and people who worry about like their sexuality, or trying to be who they are, or love who they want to love, or be the person they really are, and struggle with that. And hopefully some of this work can help people. This work that I'm doing, the work that you do, the work that Marlene does, all these, different things can help. But it's bittersweet in that, you make something which helps people, but the fact that there are people in need of help in the first place is difficult, and it's one of those things that can be hard for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I just think of it as tossing a pebble into a pond, and it's going to ripple and ripple, and hopefully keeps rippling long after I'm gone. And that can be my contribution to helping people on the planet. And same with your book. I wonder, do you have any other projects on the go?
Yes, I'm working on a couple of different kind of things. Nothing really substantial yet in terms of talking about them. But one of the problems that I have is I have so many different interests and things that I want to do, and it's like going from this to this to this, and kind of finding things that I really can really devote the time to. But yeah, there's so many things I want to do, and I only have a short amount of time to do them, as we talked about, right?
$300.
I have to do things. But it's about that balance, right? It's about striking a balance between not losing your head with your work, but also and taking the time to self-care and being responsible as an individual, and making time for those who you care about. Creating those balances, can be really difficult. But yeah, there's so many things I want to do, and I'm excited about all the things potentially that I have coming out in the next couple of years, hopefully, or a couple months, or we'll see.
Wow, that's exciting. Now I'm curious about it. How can people find you or get your book? We will include some links in the show notes. Do you have a presence on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, anything like that?
Yeah. So I have a website, which is theatheistbook.com. Good URL, I think. Atheistbook.com. And I'm on Facebook as well. People can find me there. The Atheist Book also on Facebook. And yeah, I used to be on Twitter more. I'm not really on Twitter much recently. I wonder why. What's been going on? Yeah, so mostly through Facebook and through Instagram as well. The Atheist Book Instagram. I post a lot of photos, and just through the website as well is where people can get the book or the film.
Wonderful. Well. Oh, it's been so nice to meet and connect with you and hear a little bit about what it was like doing these projects, putting the book together and the documentary. And I'm just so grateful that you had the idea and then you had the gumption and tenacity to follow through and do that hard work. So thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you do. It's incredibly important. And I'm so thrilled to be able to speak with you.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you're going to have a great day. Take care.